My name is Alex, and I'm what you might call in between opportunities. That's the polite way of saying I was flat broke, and my landlord was starting to use my first name in his increasingly less polite reminder texts about the rent. So, when the ad for a night shift gig at the Starlight Valley Storage Solutions warehouse popped up, I jumped on it. The pay was decent. The hours meant I wouldn't have to see too many people, which, honestly, was a plus after my last customer service disaster. And they were hiring immediately. No experience necessary. Just a pulse and a willingness to be surrounded by other people's forgotten junk from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. seemed perfect. The warehouse itself was a beast. Located on the outskirts of town, where the streetlights got shy and the woods started to creep in, it loomed like a giant, corrugated metal, toned to the weak glow of a couple of sputtering floodlights. My interview was a 5-minute chat with a guy named Henderson, whose face looked like it had been slept on for a week. He mostly just grunted and handed me a flimsy ID badge and a set of keys that jangled like a jailer's. Lock up tight when you leave. Don't touch what ain't yours. Stay awake. That was the extent of my training. The first few nights were quiet. Eerily so. Warehouses are big, empty, sounding places by nature, but this one had a particular brand of silence that felt heavy, like a blanket smothering any normal noise. My job was simple: patrol the aisles, make sure all the unit doors were secure, and generally be a warm body on site. The aisles were long, cavernous rows stacked high with metal roll, up doors, each marked with a faded number. Some were pristine, others dented and scratched. Behind each one, someone's life was packed away in boxes and bubble wrap. The only sounds were the hum of the ancient fluorescent lights overhead, a constant low-level thrum that vibrated in my teeth, and the squeak of my own sneakers on the polished concrete floor. Sometimes, a light would flicker erratically in a distant aisle, casting dancing, distorted shadows that played tricks on my eyes. I'd tell myself it was just bad wiring. This place was old. Old places had quirks. But then, other little things started to niggle at the edge of my perception. There was a smell in aisle 12, near the back corner. It wasn't a bad smell, not like rot or chemicals. It was sweet. Almost like overripe fruit, but with a faint, metallic tang underneath. I only ever caught whiffs of it, and never when I was looking for it. I'd walk down aisle 12, nothing. Then, later, walking past the entrance to it, the scent would drift out for a second, then vanish. And the cold spots. Random, isolated pockets of air that were a good 10 degrees colder than the rest of the warehouse. No drafts, no open vents. Just a sudden, prickling chill that would raise goosebumps on my arms before I walked out of it a few steps later. I started to map them in my head. One was always by Unit 347. Another tended to hover at the intersection of aisles 7 and 8. I tried to rationalize it all. Old building, poor insulation, weird air currents. My brain was good at supplying logical explanations, probably because the alternative was less palatable. One night, about a week in, I was doing my rounds. Flashlight beam cutting a swath through the gloom. Henderson was too cheap to keep all the aisle lights on. I passed Unit 218, a big double unit. I'd checked it on my first patrol. The heavy steel latch was down, secured with a standard padlock. Now, as my light skimmed over it, I saw the latch was up. Not open, just unlatched. The padlock still hung there, locked. But the latch itself was raised a good 6 inches. My heart gave a little thump. Had I missed it earlier, I was tired, sure, but I was usually methodical. I pushed the heavy latch back down, the clang echoing unnaturally loud in the silence. I made a mental note. Double-check 218 on the next round. Later, I found a piece of paper on the floor in aisle 4. It was a child's drawing, crayon on cheap, lined paper, a stick figure family under a lopsided sun. Nothing inherently creepy about that, except it was pristine. No dust, no footprints. No creases like it had been dropped and forgotten. It looked like it had been placed there, carefully, just moments before. I picked it up, a weird feeling crawling up my spine. There were no units in ISIL 4 that belonged to a family. With young kids, most were commercial storage. Judging by the logos I'd glimpsed on boxes during Henderson's initial, cursory tour, I tucked the drawing into my pocket, telling myself a kid must have dropped it during the day. But the warehouse was supposedly locked and alarmed after 6 p.m., and I was the only one with keys to the main building during my shift. The wrongness, as I started to call it in my head, was subtle. Like a radio station slightly out of tune, playing a familiar song with just enough distortion to make it unsettling. Tonight, though, it felt different, sharper. I was in the small, grimy office Henderson called the security hub, basically a desk, a chair that leaned precariously to one side, and a wall of dead CCTV monitors. I was making notes in the logbook, the scratching of my pen the loudest sound for miles. Then I heard it. A whisper. It was faint, so faint I thought I'd imagined it. Maybe the hum of the lights playing tricks again. I held my breath, listening. Silence. Then, again, closer this time, seeming to come from just outside the office door. It wasn't words, not that I could make out. More like a sigh, or someone drawing a slow, raspy breath. My skin went cold. I wasn't armed. Henderson had laughed when I asked about that. Who's gonna rob a warehouse full of dusty sofas, Alex? My only weapon was a heavy-duty maglite. I grabbed it, my palms suddenly sweaty, and stood up slowly. The office door was thin particle board. It had a small, grimy window at eye level. I crept towards it, my sneakers suddenly feeling like lead weights. I told myself it was the wind, a draft, anything. I peered through the window. The main corridor outside was dimly lit by the emergency exit signs, casting long, eerie green shadows. Empty. Silent. Then, from the end of the corridor, from the deep darkness where ISIL 1 started, I saw movement. Not a person. It was too low to the ground. A shadow. Darker than the others, detaching itself from the gloom at the base of the shelving units. It slid, rather than walked. A patch of concentrated blackness, about the size of a large dog, but shapeless. It moved with an unnatural smoothness, silent and fluid, like spilled ink flowing across the concrete. It wasn't coming towards me. It was moving parallel to the office, down the main thoroughfare, heading towards the loading docks at the far end of the building. I stood frozen, the maglite clutched in a death grip, my breath caught in my throat. What in the absolute hell was that? An animal? A trick of the light? My overtired brain finally snapping. It reached the end of the corridor and melted into the deeper shadows around the loading bay doors, and was gone. The silence it left behind was more profound, more terrifying than any noise. The hum of the lights now sounded like a scream. I stayed glued to that window for what felt like an hour, heart hammering against my ribs. I don't know what I saw, but the wrongness of Starlight Valley Storage Solutions wasn't just in my head anymore. It was real, and it was moving. The image of that sliding, shapeless shadow was burned into my retinas. I spent the rest of that night jumping at every flicker of the lights, every creak of the building settling. Sleep was out of the question when I got home. I just sat on my couch, staring at the wall, the mag light still in my hand until the sun came up. I almost didn't go back. Almost. But the rent wasn't going to pay itself. And the thought of explaining to Henderson why I was quitting after a week, without a more concrete reason than I saw a scary shadow, was somehow almost as daunting as facing whatever lurked in that warehouse. So, I went back, armed with a fresh dose of caffeine and a deeply unhealthy level of anxiety. I clocked in. The first few hours of the next shift were almost disappointingly normal. The silence was still heavy. The lights still hummed their off-key tune, but no whispers, no unexplained cold spots, no animate darkness. I started to wonder if I had just been overtired, if my mind had played a cruel trick on me. Then I got to AL-12. The sweet, metallic smell was back, stronger this time, almost cloying. It seemed to cling to the air, thicker than usual, and with it, a coldness that sank right into my bones, far more intense than the fleeting cold spots I'd noticed before. It was as if the entire isle had become a walk-in freezer. I hesitated, my breath pluming in front of me. This wasn't just a quirk of the building. This was active. I forced myself to walk down the aisle, flashlight beam cutting through the sudden mist my breath was creating. Halfway down, I saw it. Another child's drawing, lying face up on the concrete. This one was different. Still crayon, still the same cheap, lined paper, but the stick figures were contorted, their limbs bent at unnatural angles. The lopsided sun from the first drawing was still there, but it was black, and red crayon tears streamed from its single wide eye. A shiver traced its way down my spine. This wasn't random. This felt like a message. As I reached to pick it up, I heard a faint scraping sound from further down the aisle, from the deep shadows near the back wall. My head snapped up, heart hammering. "Hello," I called out, my voice embarrassingly shaky. Silence. Just the hum of the lights, which suddenly seemed to pulse with the smell and the cold. I backed away slowly, leaving the drawing where it lay. The rest of my patrol was on high alert. Every shadow seemed to deepen. Every distant noise sounded like a footstep. I found myself checking over my shoulder constantly. The feeling of being watched, which had been a vague unease before, was now a suffocating certainty. Unit 218. I'd almost managed to convince myself I'd been mistaken about the latch. But as I approached it, I saw the heavy steel bar was raised again. Not just a few inches this time. It was standing almost vertically, the padlock still dangling from it. Locked tight. It was impossible. That latch was heavy. It wouldn't just spring up on its own. Someone, or something, had to have lifted it. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a faulty latch. This was deliberate. I reached out a trembling hand and pushed it down, the clang echoing far too loudly. As it settled, I heard a soft thud from inside the unit, like something heavy had been leaning against the door and had fallen back when I secured it. I should have left it. I should have run to the office, called Henderson, who probably wouldn't have answered or cared, or just walked out and never come back. But a morbid, terrified curiosity had taken root, and a part of me, the part that desperately needed this job, still clung to the hope that there was a rational explanation, a prank, anything but what my gut was screaming at me. The padlock was a standard master lock. I didn't have a key for it, or any of the unit locks. But the office Henderson had a messy ring of keys hanging on a hook by the dead CCTV monitors. Universal keys. Master keys for emergencies. It was a long shot. Back in the relative safety of the office, I scanned the key ring. Most were clearly for building doors, but a few smaller. Brassiere keys looked like they could be for padlocks. My hands were shaking so badly it took me 3 tries to get the most promising one off the ring. Returning to Unit 218 felt like walking to my own execution. The air around it was still, no particular coldness, no strange smells. Just that heavy, oppressive silence. The key slid into the padlock, it turned. My breath hitched. The lock clicked open, slowly. Heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, I lifted the roll-up door. It was heavy, groaning in protest. I only lifted it a couple of feet, enough to peer underneath with my maglite. At first, all I saw were dusty boxes, old furniture draped in white sheets, the usual forgotten detritus of people's lives. Then my light fell on something in the center of the unit. A small, child-sized wooden chair. And sitting on it, facing away from me, was a doll. A porcelain doll with blonde ringlets and a frilly blue dress. There was nothing inherently terrifying about it, yet every instinct screamed at me to slam the door and run. As I held the light steady, I saw it. A dark stain on the concrete floor around the chair's legs. And something else. A faint, almost inaudible sound. A tiny, rhythmic creaking. The doll's head was slowly, almost imperceptibly turning. I didn't wait to see its face. I dropped the door with a crash that shook the aisle, fumbled the padlock back on, and scrambled away, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Rationality had officially left the building. That thing, whatever it was not normal. I made it back to the office, my legs feeling like jelly. I slumped into Henderson's lopsided chair, trying to get my breathing under control. The wrongness wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was interacting. It was reacting to me. That's when I noticed the logbook. It was an old, battered ledger, left open on the corner of the desk, a cheap pen lying beside it. I hadn't paid it much attention before, assuming it was just for noting routine checks. But now, desperate for any kind of explanation, any context for the madness I was experiencing, I pulled it closer. Most of the entries were mundane. Night shift. All secure. JM. Night shift. ISIL 6 light out. Reported. JM. Then, about 3 months back, the handwriting changed. Sloppier, more hurried. Night shift. Cold spots again. Smell in 12 is worse. Heard the whispering. MR, my eyes scanned down. Night shift. It moved the latch on 218. I didn't open it. I won't. MR, night shift. Found another drawing. They're getting angry. It knows I'm here. MR. The entries became more erratic. The handwriting almost a scrawl. Boners to Moes Pars. Duen Gio ASLF 12 AFTR 3 MMVAR Open 218. IT 1 OT. IT 1 FREND. The last entry from NR was a week later. It was just 2 words written in shaky, barely legible letters. It's smiling. Below that, nothing. The next page was blank. Then Henderson's neat, board entries began a few days later. A cold dread, deeper than any I'd felt before, settled over me. MR, what happened to MR? The whispers, the smiling, my gaze drifted to the clock on the wall. 2:58 a.m. Aisle 12. After 3 a.m. A new sound cut through the hum of the office. A soft, dragging noise, coming from the main corridor. Like something heavy being pulled across the concrete. And with it, a faint, sweet, metallic scent, seeping under the office door. The dragging noise was getting closer. The sweet, metallic scent. Now mixed with something else. something like burnt sugar and damp earth, was so thick I could almost taste it. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the encroaching dread. The clock on the wall ticked, each second an eternity. 2:59 a.m. The logbook lay open, MR's frantic scrawl a testament to a terror I was only just beginning to comprehend. Dion Gionini area ASLE 12 AFTR 3 AM, Envidopui 18, ITYNSOU, ITYNS FREND. The dragging stopped right outside the office door. I held my breath, clutching the maglite so tightly my knuckles were white. Silence. Then, a soft, wet thump against the particle board, as if something heavy and yielding had been leaned against it. My eyes darted to the grimy window. Nothing. The clock ticked over. 300 a.m. A sound, entirely new and utterly horrifying, split the silence. It wasn't a whisper, not a drag, not a thump. It was a giggle. A child's giggle. High, pitched and distorted, as if filtered through water. And it was coming from the direction of ISIL 12. Despite every cell in my body screaming at me to stay put, to barricade the door and wait for dawn, MR's warning about ISIL 12 after 3 a.m. echoed in my mind. It wasn't just a warning, it felt like a dare, a summons. The giggling continued, interspersed with soft, cooing sounds. It was a grotesque parody of innocence. The smell intensified, the sweetness becoming sickening. I had to know. Or maybe, some darker part of me, the part that had opened Unit 218, needed to know. I crept to the door, eased it open a crack. The main corridor was empty, bathed in the sickly green emergency lights. The dragging sound was gone. The presence outside the door vanished. But the giggling from aisle 12 was clearer now, beckoning. My feet moved before my brain could fully process the stupidity of my actions. I found myself walking towards ISIL 12, the maglite beam trembling in my hand. The cold that had previously clung to the ISIL was now a palpable, biting frost. Mist curled from my mouth with every breath. The entrance to ISIL 12 was a gaping maw of darkness. The giggling was louder here, echoing off the towering shelves. "Come play," a small voice lisped, the sound seeming to emanate from the very air around me. I stepped in. The temperature plummeted further. The metallic sweetness was overpowering, mixed with the scent of dust and something else, something like old, decaying fabric. My flashlight beam cut through the oppressive gloom, landing on the child's drawing I left on the floor. Earlier, the one with the contorted stick figures. And the black, weeping sun. It was different now. A new figure had been added. A small, smiling stick figure, holding hands with one of the contorted ones. A soft scraping sound from the end of the aisle. My light snapped towards it. There, at the very back, where the ISIL dead ended against a stained concrete wall, was the small wooden chair from Unit 218. And the doll was in it. It was facing me this time. Its porcelain face was cracked, a network of fine lines spreading from one vacant blue eye. Its blonde ringlets were matted and dull. But the most horrifying thing was its mouth. Its painted red lips were stretched into an impossibly wide, fixed smile. MR's last words slammed into my mind. "It's smiling. Hello," I whispered, my voice a dry croak. The doll's head tilted, a slow, jerky movement accompanied by the faint creak of old porcelain. Its smile seemed to widen, though I knew that was impossible. MR didn't want to play anymore. The giggling voice said, seeming to come from the doll itself, though its lips didn't move. He wasn't a good friend. My blood turned to ice. This was it. This was the core of the wrongness. What are you?" I managed, my flashlight shaking violently. I'm lonely. The doll cooed, its voice a sickening blend of childish innocence and ancient malice. I need new friends. Friends who stay. Then, the shadows around the doll deepened, coalesced. For a horrifying second, I saw the shapeless black mass I'd seen in the corridor. But this time it seemed to flow from the doll, or from beneath the chair, like a living, viscous darkness. It swirled around the base of the chair, tendrils of it reaching out, caressing the dusty concrete. "What did you do to MR?" I asked, a cold dread gripping me. The doll's smile didn't falter. He broke the rules. He tried to leave. Friends don't leave. The giggling started again. Louder this time, echoing in the confined space, bouncing off the metal shelves packed the unseen things. I started to back away, slowly, one step at a time. My heel bumped against a loose box. It skittered, the sound deafening in the charged silence that followed the giggles. The doll's head snapped towards the sound, its one good eye seeming to fix on me, with an intensity that was terrifyingly alive. The smile remained, but the atmosphere shifted, became charged with a palpable menace. "You opened the door," it whispered, the childish lisp gone, replaced by a dry, rasping sound that scraped at my nerves. "You looked inside. You're curious. Curious friends are the best friends." The shadows around it pulsed. The temperature dropped again, and I could feel the moisture in the air crystallizing on my skin. The sweet, metallic smell was now tinged with the undeniable scent of decay. I have to go," I stammered, turning to flee. "No one leaves!" The voice was a shriek now, high and piercing. And it wasn't just coming from the doll. It was all around me, inside my head, clawing at my sanity. I ran. I didn't look back. The shrieking pursued me, echoing through the aisles. I could hear things falling from shelves behind me, dull thuds and crashes. The cold pursued me, a biting, unnatural chill that seemed to sap the strength from my limbs. I burst out of aisle 12 and into the main corridor, gasping for breath, my lungs burning. I didn't stop. I ran for the office, slammed the door, and fumbled with the lock, my hands slick with sweat. Locked. Safe. No. Nowhere in this warehouse felt safe. I collapsed into the chair, shaking uncontrollably. The shrieking had stopped, but the silence that replaced it was heavy with an unspoken threat. I looked at the clock. 3:07 a.m. It felt like I'd been in aisle 12 for an eternity. My eyes fell on the logbook again. MR's warnings. His descent into terror. I understood now. I understood the desperate scrawl, the fear that bled through the ink. Then, I noticed something new. On the page after MR's final, chilling entry, a new drawing had appeared. It wasn't there before, I was sure of it. It was a crude crayon drawing of a stick figure me, I assumed. Given the terrified expression and the flashlight in its hand, standing before a smiling doll on a chair. And next to my stick figure, another, smaller stick figure had been drawn, holding its hand. This new figure was also smiling, a wide, vacant, porcelain smile. Below the drawing, a single, shaky word was written in red crayon: friend. This was the point of no return. I hadn't just witnessed the horror. It had acknowledged me, interacted with me, claimed me in some grotesque way. The wrongness wasn't just in the warehouse, it was focused on me. I had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had drawn me a picture. The consequence of my curiosity, of opening Unit 218, of venturing into aisle 12 after 3 a.m., was that I was now part of its story. The sweet, metallic smell, fainter now but still present, began to seep under the office door again. and with it the soft, almost inaudible sound of something small, something light, being dragged across the concrete. Coming closer, the dragging sound, soft and insidious, was right outside the office door again. Friend. The word in red crayon burned in my vision. I was trapped. The flimsy lock on the office door felt as substantial as wet paper against whatever was out there. The sweet, cloying smell of decay and something else, something like burnt sugar and old metal, was a suffocating presence. My mind raced. A chaotic jumble of MR's warnings, the doll's impossible smile, and the chilling implication of that final drawing. It wanted a friend. It thought I was its new friend. The previous friend. MR had tried to leave, and whatever happened to him was clearly horrific. Escape. That was the only thought that cut through the terror. I couldn't stay here until 6 a.m. I wouldn't last. The dragging stopped. A tiny, almost playful tap came at the door. Then another, like a child wanting attention. My eyes darted around the small office. There was a window, high up, facing the outside. It was small, probably reinforced, but it was the only other way out. The main corridor was a death trap. I grabbed Henderson's rickety chair, my movements jerky and uncoordinated. The tapping continued, a little more insistent now. I slammed the chair against the wall beneath the window, climbed onto its wobbling seat, and reached for the latch. It was stiff, painted over multiple times. My fingers fumbled, slick with sweat. A louder thump at the door. The particle board shuddered. The window latch finally gave with a rusty shriek. I pushed the window outwards. It opened onto the dark, overgrown area at the back of the warehouse, where the woods pressed in. Freedom, or at least a chance. Another heavy blow landed on the door, splintering the wood around the lock. I scrambled, half climbing, half falling through the narrow opening, scraping my side painfully. I landed hard on the damp earth outside, the fall knocking the wind from my lungs. The maglite clattered beside me. I snatched it up, ignoring the pain, and pushed myself to my feet. Behind me, from inside the office, came a sound that wasn't a giggle or a whisper. It was a screech of pure, unadulterated rage, high-pitched and inhuman, followed by the violent splintering of the office door. I didn't look back. I ran. I crashed through the undergrowth, branches whipping at my face, the maglite beam bouncing erratically, illuminating a terrifying, shifting world of trees and shadows. The sounds from the warehouse faded, replaced by the pounding of my own heart and the ragged gasps tearing from my throat. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs screamed, until I stumbled out onto the deserted access road. I didn't stop running until I reached the main road, the one with the sparse, lonely streetlights. I flagged down the first car that came along, a beat-up pickup truck driven by a startled-looking elderly man. I must have looked like a madman, wild-eyed, covered in dirt and scratches, babbling about something in the warehouse. He didn't ask many questions, just drove me into town and dropped me near the police station. I never went back to Starlight Valley Storage Solutions. I couldn't. I called Henderson from a payphone the next day, my voice still shaking, and told him I quit. I didn't give him the real reason. What could I say? That the warehouse was haunted by a malevolent, doll-obsessed entity that collected friends. He'd have laughed, then probably charged me for the broken office door. The police. I thought about it. I even walked to the station. But what would I tell them? I had no proof. Just a wild story and a child's drawing that I'd somehow lost in my panicked flight. They'd think I was crazy or on drugs. MR had probably tried to tell someone. Look where it got him. The fear, though, that's the part that never really left. It's a cold knot in my stomach that tightens whenever I see an old doll in a thrift store, or when I catch a whiff of something overly sweet and metallic. For weeks after, I slept with the lights on, jumping at every creak and shadow. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, the image of that smiling doll, its cracked face and dead eyes, seared into my memory. Sometimes I wonder about MR. Did it add his likeness to its collection of crayon drawings? Is he now a permanent fixture in that cold, dark place, another silent, smiling friend? And sometimes late at night when the house is quiet, I think I hear it. A faint, dragging sound from just outside my own door. A soft, almost playful tap. I tell myself it's just the old house settling. The wind. My imagination working overtime. But I always check the locks. Twice. And I never ever look in ISIL 12 after 3 a.m., no matter where I am. Because some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed. And some friends never really let you go.